Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery, checking in on my yellow worm buckets that have African night crawlers in them. And they've been fed 25 times, but the age of the bins eludes me. I've got a label on the side. You know what? Hold on, let me just check. Hey Siri, how many days have passed since August 11th?
It was 243 days ago.
Alright, so these systems are 243 days of age. And 15 days have passed now since the last time we fed these little guys. I had a whole bunch of this really dry walnut bread that I kind of rehydrated before giving it to the worms. And besides that, they got something else. For some reason, the walnut bread really stood out in my mind, and you know what it was? The other thing they got besides walnut bread was the leaves of a couple bunches of radishes. So the radish leaves I kind of figured would probably get eaten pretty quickly. With that walnut bread, though, I was a little bit uncertain as to what to expect. So I figured we would just come in here, since more than 2 weeks have passed now. Figured we'd just come in here and check how they're doing and give them a quick feeding. What I've got for the worms today is perhaps not so much, but it's a couple of food items that they probably like. There's mango peels, no seeds, just the mango peels, and some cabbage. So let's dig in and see what we see. Now, you know, besides the foods that I just showed you, I've also got my nice little batch of worm chow, which is, for the most part, pumpkin seeds. I think I threw some leaves in there, and maybe a couple other ingredients, perhaps the seeds from some peppers. But since the kitchen scraps from the freezer are a little bit on the kind of stingy side, I figured we can maybe complement a little bit with my worm chow, of which I feel like I've got a pretty good amount to spread around. And you know, I guess the only reason I'm probing so deep is because I am sort of sensing that this material in the system is a little bit muddy, and it's making me wonder whether perhaps at the end it would be a good idea to skip putting those plastic bubble wrap coverings back on. Perhaps substitute them with some sort of another top covering material, or even leave them uncovered. I do like covering, but when I want the top covering to be a little bit more porous and capable of breathing, and perhaps allowing for the system to shed a little bit of what I think to be excess moisture, sometimes I'll just use a sheet of newspaper or something like that. So I am getting the feeling that perhaps leaving off the plastic coverings at this point might be a good idea. The warmer weather's been rolling in. The past couple days have been very nice. And as that starts happening, the furnace runs less and less. And I attest a lot of the dryness in my bins during the winter to the forced hot air heating system in my house, which just seems to dry out the air throughout the house everywhere. So I do anticipate a little bit more moisture in my bins and a little bit less drying resulting from the furnace running all the time. So now, on top of the worm chow that I sprinkled in, this other stuff that I'm sprinkling in is grit. The grit that I use in my bins is pulverized eggshell. And that's also just another one of those things that the worms make use of to grind up their foods and their gizzards. And I don't always add grit. And I wasn't quite sure when the last time was that I gave these particular wormies some pulverized eggshell, so I figured I would toss a little bit of that in with today's feeding as well. And you know, at the age that these bins are at already, I've been wondering if perhaps withholding bedding might be a good idea. So that's the reason we didn't include any bedding with today's feeding. You know, eventually when the worms are ready to be moved on to some new home and we want to harvest the castings they've left behind, it is always kind of nice when the castings are not littered with all kinds of uneaten food scraps or bedding bits. So I think we might start staging these systems for harvest eventually, starting with perhaps the withholding of bedding during their feedings. So I don't really have paper on hand to cover up with, but since we're not going to be putting the plastic back on, I figured I would just set it aside. At some point later I can come back in here with just a little sheet of newspaper or something to provide the systems with at least a little bit of top cover protection. And I got a feeling that by leaving the plastic off, it's going to benefit the systems by allowing for a little bit of drying. I was just checking the plastic here to see if any worms were stuck on them, since they're not going back in, and just want to make sure we don't leave any little guys stranded. These systems have been getting, for the most part, managed in the same exact way, except for in the very beginning when we ran a little set it and forget it test over here in bucket number 2, where the system simply did not get any attention from us for 7 weeks straight, so for 49 days, up until the systems reached 100 days of age. So from day 51 to day 100, the system had been stocked up with a whole bunch of leaves, completely drenched leaves, right up to the rim. And I think I even sprinkled in some worm chow in between additions of leaves as I was stacking them in there. And then we pretty much left the system to its own devices. The only thing we would do when we would come in here to provide bucket number 1 with a feeding was to just peek in under the bubble wrap in here just to make sure things weren't looking any different from the last time we had been in here. And as long as we were able to verify that everything was looking okay, we would simply put the top covering right back on and let things continue untouched. So just like we did over in bucket number 1, I'm giving them a little bit of worm chow, a little bit of grit, and what remains of this portion of cabbage and mango peels. And then, you know, as time goes on, I'll be definitely paying close attention to the types of foods they're getting, just to make sure it's nothing that's going to end up leaving all kinds of residue within the castings, hopefully leading to a nice harvest of castings that are free of any sort of debris and stuff. Another thing we've hinted at for a while now, and I've definitely been considering but haven't really made the decision yet to move on the idea, was to possibly transfer these little guys out of these buckets into bus bins, where the top surface would be much larger and the depth of the material would be much shallower, and that in itself would allow for quite a bit more drying if we wanted that to happen. So all I've got left now to do is to go round up some pieces of paper with which we can cover these little guys up with. I got to put these bins away afterwards and get a few things cleaned up. But that stuff's all boring, so I'm not going to keep you around for that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.